Hi guys, it's Megan from I'm a Mom Too, and I'm here today with my lovely friend Laurie, and we're doing this as part of the Many Faces of Autism series. And I met Laurie a few months ago now. I can't remember exactly when, but at our local support group that we've actually started up for parents of children with autism. And she very kindly agreed, yay, to share her family's journey with autism. So I just wanted to start maybe with what your family looks like, and just describe that to everybody.
Okay, so there's myself and my husband, and then we have two children. Elle, who is a 7-year-old girl, turning 8 soon, but
I'm probably turning 16.
maybe 20. And then we have M, who is 5, and he will be 6 end of May. So he is my child who's on the spectrum. We live with my in-laws, and yeah.
Okay.
That's our lovely family.
Great. And so describe to everybody what the journey was to get to diagnosis, because you're still very new in the whole autism community. So describe when did you know? What were the behaviors that you were seeing that kind of led you to go to the doctor initially?
I knew you were going to ask that, so I was trying to remember. Probably when Matthew was about 1.5, 2, we were going to the wild baby appointments, and he wasn't hitting some of his milestones. He wasn't making noises or sounds. He was lining up everything. So that was my first indicator. All his cars.
None of our kids line anything up, do they?
All his cars had to be all straight, and he would look away for a minute, and I would mess with him and flip 2. And as soon as he looked back, it was like instantly that, he knew that they were out of sync, and he fixed them. So he wasn't talking. And then when he was turning 2, he wasn't saying any words, not even mama or dada or those, simple sounds.
Standard words that you're saying by 2 years old. Yeah.
So the doctor, I would go in, he would be asking about, going to early words, about him not talking, this and that. So I put it off for a little bit, but then I found I better not. So I called them and got him in. And when I was driving here today, I remembered a conversation I was having with a friend. We were at the library, and we were talking about our kids, and I said how I figured that he had autism. Even though I knew nobody with autism, I didn't, even in school, I didn't.
So how did you come to that conclusion if you didn't know anyone that was on the spectrum?
Society.
Okay. There was enough kind of within your just external world that you thought maybe.
And Elle, since JK has had a little boy who has autism in her class.
Oh, okay.
So I would see him, and she loves him to death, and would always bring him extra presents or make his birthday cards for him, and so she every September she's thrilled when he's still in her class.
Right. And she probably recognizes a lot with her little brother
now
in
she
him,
does,
right?
Yes. And so it made it kind of easier for her to understand that M has autism, although his autism obviously is different than her little friend. Because,
I'm just going to insert here, when you've met one person on the autism spectrum, you've only met one person on the spectrum. Everybody, they all have a lot of behaviors that are the same, but each person is different.
Right.
Sorry, my little soapbox first.
That's okay. So I had mentioned this to my friend, and she's like, well, what happens if it is? I'm like,
It is.
I love him, and it's just going to be, the next little journey that we take. So, we went to early words. He started talking a month before he turned 4.
Great.
I had put him into daycare at 3 to get him socializing and maybe help him with his talking.
Right.
So that was, that. And then...
Now, I'm just going to interject a question here. Was your daughter... Was she speaking for him?
At times.
At times? Because I know my daughter was speaking for my son and continues to this day.
And my mother-in-law would too, even though there's language barrier there. Even with my daughter, I would say, okay, Elle, what comes next? With her learning when she's, 2.5 or whatever. And she would answer, I'm like, really? I know you know it. I would like to see if she does. So, and she still did it with Matthew.
Right.
Right? So... It is what it is, I guess.
Yeah.
And then early words referred me to a developmental pediatrician to see if there was something developmentally why he wasn't talking.
Right. Some are from a physical standpoint,
Right.
perhaps. Okay.
And then, that's where it was. And then we had a couple appointments, and we got diagnosed last February. At the
So you
age
just
of-
had 1 year with diagnosis then.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
And I say congratulations because it answers all of our questions, right? Like, it's confirmation almost that there's nothing wrong with our children. I hate that. There's nothing wrong with them. They just see the world differently. And we get confirmation as parents that we're not crazy. Which is kind of helpful when we feel like we are losing our minds all the time. But, just to find out and get that confirmation from the medical community that our child just has autism. Not a big deal.
No, and it has been. I mean, yes, there's struggles.
There's learning curves,
Matthew
huge learning curves.
Is high functioning, so I do have some struggles, but not as much as some families do, because now he is verbal. You know what I mean, and reading.
Is he fluently verbal now?
Pretty much.
Okay.
I just have
And
to
other
watch when he
people can
goes too
understand?
fast.
Right.
Gets
And
excited.
other people can understand him. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. If I talk too fast, and then we'll be like, slow down. Or if he's upset, but that's any kid really. If they're talking fast, if they're crying, would you understand what anyone says when they're crying? Right? It's just
yeah.
So
it's just more pronounced in our kids. So
right. So yeah, he's in SK right now. So next year will be the big test.
Yeah. When he has to sit down all day long.
Yes.
In class.
I've already been on Pinterest seeing different ways of how I can present, because I'm not sure how he's going to do. Because at home he's always on the go.
Yeah.
Always, walking, stimming, bent over the couch watching YouTube.
Yeah. Now, what do his stims look like?
He will hum, and he's fast too, and he goes back and forth. At times,
so he paces.
Yes.
Okay.
He will go around and around, but not as
the
often.
circuits. My son will do those circuits for hours sometimes.
Yes. But mostly he likes to go back and forth, and he'll pick 2 points and do that for a while. I'll try and refocus his attention. Matthew, come cuddle with me over here.
Yeah.
And he'll come, he'll sit, but then he'll get back up, and then maybe he'll start 2 different points.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And at school, when he gets to, he'll do a little bit. But he's humming. Sometimes he'll do flapping, but not as much anymore. He did a lot when he was younger.
Right.
More flapping. So, just the humming and going back and forth.
Now, how has your experience in school been? Have you had a supportive teacher this year, or?
JK was rough, but I also didn't tell the school yet.
Well, because you didn't have diagnosis
yet.
Right.
And I wanted to wait until my follow-up in the October, which he would have been then 5 and an SK. But things were going on, so I but I told them, I said, well, I have the diagnosis so then I had to get all the paperwork and get him going for SK. So then this year he has an EA in the afternoon. The classroom he was in last year it was 2 classrooms, 2 JK, SK classrooms together.
Okay.
So 60 kids, 3, 4, 5 years old.
Wow.
In one classroom, but there was like a teacher and an ECE on one side, teacher ECE on one side.
So it was just within one physical room,
yes.
but they were separated in some way?
Yes, but there was no huge wall or anything. It was
oh, dear.
kind of like a half wall for
I
half
couldn't handle 60 kids in one room. Sometimes I can barely handle 2.
Yes, so that didn't help Matthew either in JK. But his EC was fabulous with him and tried, she would do things at night, printing special things off for him.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Because he does not like to hold a pencil. He holds it like in his fist.
Right.
So that was good. Okay. But then, kids were in his face. He wasn't liking it. He was, pushing away. He did bite a couple times. So I finally had to tell him. And so about his classroom, I was going to get him moved this year because the chaosness of that classroom.
Yes, that's chaotic for any kid.
Yes,
Let
even
alone
the
a
teachers
child
of
on the
ECs
spectrum.
were,
Yeah, exactly.
Chaos. So I was having him moved. I wrote a letter, so I was going to have him upstairs at a normal classroom. So that happened this year. But his teacher that came in, she decided to drop down she was teaching grade 1, 2, so she decided to do the JKSK So he got placed with her, and she has a background in special ed.
Oh, fantastic!
So
Yay!
love her.
That's amazing.
Can you follow him, please, from each grade?
You can keep going up to grade 8, right?
Yeah.
No problem.
So she's so fantastic. I'm so lucky that his SK year is with her. They were studying germs. So they had little microscope slides. And he's like, nope, we need a microscope. She's like, okay. So she took him and searched the whole school for a microscope.
Oh.
What teacher is going to do that?
That's
not
fantastic.
Very many.
Yeah.
So between her and his EA in the afternoon, he's having a fantastic year.
So they'll be a great resource then to move forward to grade 1 for the meetings with the grade 1 teacher.
Yes.
That'll be fantastic. Because grade 1 is always pretty difficult for our kids because they've gone from, you know, a play-based, child-centered classroom in JK and SK, moving into a mainstream classroom where they have to sit in a chair almost all day.
Yes.
Which, you know, let's face it, even us, going into an office every day, we have to get up and have our coffee breaks or whatever. So it's a tough transition for some of our kids, and if we don't have that extra resource and that extra help to move forward that understands our kids, it can be a little challenging.
Yes.
So.
But I'm going to take your advice, because in one of the workshops you had mentioned, or maybe even the coffee time, getting the teachers to write out the previous year. So I'm going to get her to write something about Matthew, because you never know.
Some tricks about Matthew to move forward.
You never know what happens in life, right? Like she may get moved, or we may move, or I don't know. So I'm going to take that tip that you told us, to get the teachers to write out, so that I have that
at the end of the year.
Yes.
Before the end of the year, so that they can move forward for the next year.
Absolutely.
That's great. Now, Laurie actually shared with me recently about a family function. I'm going to put you on the spot here. A family function that came up that normally she would say no to because it was kind of chaotic, but it was one of those family functions you have to go to. And I'd love for you to describe the pizza situation.
Oh, yes.
It was at a restaurant. So
at a restaurant in Oakville, so that, says, it's a fancy restaurant.
Yeah.
We got there, and he didn't want to go. All day he was saying he didn't want to go. And I knew the father that was hosting the event is a cousin of my husband, and he knows about Matthew and his wife as well, and they understand the language barrier with my in-laws. My in-laws don't really know. I mean, John says that he's told them, but I don't know how much they understand.
Right.
So I kind of just
even if there wasn't the language barrier, sometimes that happens too, right?
They're older, they're from Europe, you know what I mean? So whatnot.
It can complicate it a little bit.
These two cousins, they know, and obviously they're fine with it, and they, they're understanding. So he had asked if there's any dietary. So I said, okay, Elle's fine, Oh, and he wanted to know about sitting at a special, like at a children's table, to kind of keep the adults together and then the children together. So I said, Elle is fine, she can go sit at the table. She'll be like a big girl. I'm all by myself. I don't have to sit with mommy and daddy. She would love that. M, keep him beside myself and my husband, just to make sure, that he is sitting down, he is going to eat, because he is very picky with his eating.
Yeah.
I can probably list on my hand what he eats. And then for dietary, I said, well, I saw on the website, because I had looked ahead and looked on the website to see if there was something.
There was a lot of prep work beforehand, let me tell you.
To make sure that he would eat, because basically he will eat pasta, and it has to be red sauce. And if there's meatball, it has to be meatballs. It can't just be chunks of meat. He will eat pizza, chicken nuggets, french fries, grilled cheese, if I cut it with his dinosaur cutters. Other than that, it was just a hunk of bread. He ain't touching it. So I had to look first to see, because I know that they're not going to let me bring something in, but I have smuggled stuff in because
we all
he has
do.
to eat, right?
I do it all the time.
So I looked. They had pizza, so I mentioned that to the dad. And he's like, okay, great. So we'll have pizza for the kids and whatnot. Just cheese, right? I'm like, yes, just cheese. So that was fine. So we get to the restaurant, and of course he's like, I want to go to Oliver's. I'm like, well, what is Oliver's? I looked across the street. There's another restaurant with Oliver's name on it. Awesome. Because, of course, Matthew reads at like grade 4, grade 5 level since he was 4 years old. So I'm like, okay, cool. No, we're staying at this restaurant. So he was sitting with me, and actually he did really good. He sat for the most time. There was no stimming, which I was surprised.
There was lots of stimming after, though, wasn't there?
A little bit,
Probably
but not much.
when you got home. Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, it was pretty
That's
late.
usually, my son will kind of
get it all out.
He'll be good when he's out, and then when he gets home, it's hours.
No, we got home pretty late, so it was
that
it
might
was
be it,
bedtime. Yeah. He did do some humming, and they had put on our place what the course was, what our choices were. So of course Matthew, read it. I don't like anything on this. I'm like, I know, baby. Streets has a special menu for the kids, and I told him what was on it. So he's like, okay, well, I want pizza. When's my special menu coming? He wanted to read it himself. Maybe he didn't believe me.
Well, everybody else was reading their their menu, so why can't he?
So I'm like, okay, it's coming. Finally, an hour and 15 minutes later.
Oh my goodness.
The waitress took what we were eating because the adults had choice of 3, and the kids could order from which the kids menu or the adult menu. So finally, I said, okay, no, he'll have the pizza. Blah blah blah. Great. Now it's, when's my pizza coming? I'm hungry. I'm so hungry. I had brought granola bars, so I'm giving that to him. And the pizza comes, and it's on a breadboard, and it's shaped in an oval. So he looks at it. He's like, I don't want this pizza. It's a fancy pizza. It's in an oval. I want pizza. I'm like, please, Matthew, just try it. It's really good. Look, it's cheese, just like you wanted. Street's got it for you special. La 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 la.
Meanwhile, he's like exploding in his brain for this, right?
Right. So then the crust part didn't have very much cheese, and he's not a crust person anyways. So he took another piece, and of course it's kind of oblong triangles. He didn't say anything about that, so that was okay. And he took a bite, and there was little hunks of tomato. Get this off!
He's panicking about the tomato chunks.
So I'm using, his utensils and taking it off, and he's eating it. And then he did it again. I'm like, you know what? You're big enough. You can do it. Here, watch. So then he took care of the rest himself. So he did eat it.
Good.
Even though it was fancy pizza because it was in an oval on a breadboard. But he ate it, and that was awesome. And then some French fries came out later on as he found an iPad and was playing on an iPad. He ate some French fries as well. But we have to, investigate, see if there's anything that they can eat. I know from my daughter's dance, when she dances folklore for the church, and when we have banquets or whatnot, I know there is nothing on that menu that he will eat because it's always the same stuff. So I always have to smuggle in the Wendy's. Yeah. So he gets the French fries and the nuggets, and sorry, look at me weird, but my kid has to eat. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Otherwise, people have problems when when we don't feed our children.
Because he'll verbally say, "I'm so hungry," and just keep going on and on and on. So
and for me, going into a restaurant like that, I'm sourcing out where is the hardest spot for my son to bolt from. Okay, we're sitting right there. That's an additional thing for me, is to be able to figure that one out as well.
Matthew's not too bad until he's had enough and he wants to go, and then that's it. He'll find the door, and he was at the end of the night. He'd had enough, and he did really. I was very proud of him. Yeah, he did such an awesome job that he wasn't, he didn't have any meltdowns. He wasn't trying to bolt out the door. Yeah. I would take him for a little walk. It was crowded, but I would take him for a little walk. And we went up the stairs to the washroom, even though he didn't have to go, but just to get him up
to move. Yeah,
and it was enough. He lasted. I was very proud.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that's an awesome story. That's why I wanted to share it with everybody, because yay, he did it!
Yes, my boy.
So now we are currently in April. I almost said March, but we're now in April. Yes. So looking forward to the summer, looking ahead to the summer, what does that look like for you? What kind of planning goes into summer break for your family?
Well, last year I had tried to put him into a camp. So my daughter loves to go to camp, so I had put him into a camp, and I'd gotten a call not even halfway through the day to come and get him, that he, wasn't eating his lunch, whatnot. It upset me. And when I was talking to the head counselor, I did have tears in my eyes, and I was hugging him even harder. Yeah. Because So
basically he got sent home from camp.
Yes. And later on in the day, one of the reasons that they wanted to send him home, they said I could have gotten a worker for him, or I could stay. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not going to pay you money for me to stay with my son. Yeah. The whole point of him being there was for socialization, because he was going to be out of school. And then, keep talking and whatnot, right? But basically the socialization, so that he can, get to know other kids and, learn the sharing aspect or the joining in aspect. right?
And I'm just going to interject there just about the worker issue. It's fine and dandy to get a worker for our children to be able to attend camp, but once camp has started, you can't get any funding for a worker. And to have a worker there, you're talking a lot of money. You're talking like $20 an hour for a week, for 2 weeks, for 8 weeks, for however long the child is in camp. And the deadline to be able to get funding for a worker is usually end of February, mid-March. And usually camps, this is a whole issue, camps don't publicize their schedule until like mid-March, early April. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy there. Like, let's try to try to get a worker to be able to come in and help our children in camp so they can have the same experience that other kids have. I feel like I'm soapboxing again. But we don't know when the camp is until a month after the deadline. So that's always an issue, but to be able to just find a worker and find the funds to be able to pay a worker when camp has already started is pretty much impossible.
See, and that's another thing I didn't know about because
you're brand new in the situation, right?
So I pulled him, and he was supposed to go for another week in August. I pulled it, got my money back, and him and I just did little things. Library, he loves to go to the library, so we went to the library. Just hung out while Lily was at camp.
Yeah.
But I also, a friend of mine from school, from my kids' school, had told me about Vacation Bible Schools. And my kids go to the Catholic board, so they're already aware, of that kind of stuff. I don't go to church with Matthew. For obvious reasons.
Okay, but it's obvious to me. Tell them why it's
enough.
obvious. This is the whole point of this, right? Tell them why it's obvious that he doesn't go to church.
Sitting there for a long time, having someone, talking to him and him, not being able to talk or...
and talking about very abstract theory as well, whereas our kids are very hands-on. I need to be able to touch and feel and do to be able to understand. So the concept of God and Jesus and anything like that is so far removed for our kids that they're going to start asking questions in the middle of church when they're sitting in the pews and everything, right? And that tends to get looked at a little bit.
Yes. Unless, everyone knows.
Yeah.
Christmas Eve we had to go, because my daughter with her dancing for the church, we had to go and represent. She had to, wear the folklore costume. And I'm like, okay, he's going to do it. I'm going to try. I found out that the church had a kids' room, because I hadn't seen it. I've been in the church many times, but I hadn't seen the kids' room. So I found out they had one, so I'm like, okay, I'm going to try.
Yeah. Go to the kids' room.
I don't know until I try, right? So I'm like, let's try. But it was Christmas Eve, and the kids' room had all the overflow. So we stayed for a little bit. I gave him the DS or my phone and let him play. My husband didn't like that. We're in church. I'm like, you know what? If they want us in church, this is what's going to happen. He's going to, play on this. It's not loud. He's not disturbing everyone. We're in the kids' room.
Yeah.
He wasn't having any of this. I'm like, fine. So Matthew and I just left. We went in the van, and we watched a movie.
Yeah.
So, I did that. But we're going to attempt again because, my daughter has her communion.
Right.
So I already know I've seen that kid's room, so I'm like, okay, he's going to go in there, and I'm hoping it's not going to be busy because it's only the school. It's not a huge after mass with the rest of the congregation. It's just a school, so I'm sure that it's going to be not as full. So I hopefully will be a better experience for him because, I do want him to go, and I do want to go, as a family, but...
So what are you going to take into your bag for that experience to be able to keep him busy and entertained?
I'll have books. I'll bring a DS. Or he can have my phone. But the phone might back first, so maybe I won't because they won't be Wi-Fi.
Right.
Because he can't watch YouTube.
Yes.
A little favorite of his. And many other kids too, right? So
my son too, for sure.
He'll have books and the DS. So he can play a game or he can read.
Right.
And that will occupy him. Or he can do his stimming.
So when he was in the children's room, what did that look like to an outside observer? Was he doing that right in the middle of the other kids there? Was he off to the side? Was he interacting with kids?
No. I had him to the side, sitting in a chair.
Okay.
But walking to the children's room, I hate church. I hate church. I hate church. And the older people who, it's a folklore group, so it's another language, are just looking at him.
not approving.
Realizing. Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, it's okay, Matthew, and we just went along our way.
Yeah.
But
that's where mom has very thick skin to be dealing with all the looks that we all get.
It's not quite so thick yet, but
yeah, it's getting there.
It's getting there. Yes.
It's getting there.
Yes. So he went to Vacation Bible School last year. They're fabulous with him.
Oh, great. And is that a full day?
No, it's 3 hours.
Okay.
They have a lot of teenagers that are volunteering. So he basically had his own little worker. So
great.
They had a
without it being
with
an
them.
official worker.
Yes.
Yeah.
And oh gosh, he loved it. He was even on stage.
Oh, wow.
He was singing.
Fantastic.
When I walked in, he saw me, waved, and stayed there. And continued singing.
See what can happen when there's one-on-one with our kids?
But yeah, and they let him read. I told him, stuff, his little quirks or what can set him off or, what he enjoys. And they
accepted it.
Yes.
And they worked with it.
And he went to 3 of them, no problems, and I never had one phone call.
So they will be the ones he goes to again this summer.
Yes. Well, one of them, he now goes to Awana every Thursday night with his sister.
What's that?
It's I call it youth group, but people tell me that that's for the older kids. But they they do Bible verses, they play games.
Right.
Just more of the interaction.
Right.
And again, he's got a little teenage girl. He seems to bond with the teenage girls.
He's a lady killer already.
And they stay with him. He does his verses. I mean, he did 5 verses in one night.
That's
My daughter's
fantastic.
only done 2 in one night. You know what I mean? So, because he loves the reading and his memory is, out of this world.
Yeah.
So he goes there and he enjoys it.
Yeah.
So that's coming to an end, and then he'll do the Vacation Bible Schools. So that'll keep him occupied.
Fantastic.
And socialized.
Yes. That's the important part,
yes.
right?
Yeah. I mean, we can do all the day trips and all the camping that we want as a family, but it's only him and his sister.
Yeah.
Or him and his cousins. You know what I mean? So he needs to be with other children. So I'll do the Vacation Bible School. I'll try and find someone Lily's at camp.
Right.
So that he can still be thinking, like, oh, I'm going somewhere too, right?
Yeah.
So.
And it's important for them to have separate time as well.
If I do find one around my house at the same time as Lily, it will be the first time that he has gone somewhere without his sister being in the vicinity.
That'll be nerve-wracking for you.
Yes. Because as much as my daughter can set him off sometimes, because she's very lovey-dovey, hug me, kiss me, I just want to talk her singing, because I guess the pitch of her singing, he doesn't like it. She does look out for him.
Right.
And she will steer him, where he needs to be, or she'll tell us, well, he has autism, he's autistic, so she sticks up for him, not really knowing what she's saying yet, but she's
that's what my daughter does
a warrior.
too.
Yes.
It's just, you know what, he has autism, you're going to deal with it, is basically her attitude towards it. So yeah. Now just one last thing before we end off, because I can never remember what it's called, but your son actually has the separate diagnosis for reading, and basically it's this thing where the majority of our kids on the autism spectrum, we've never had to teach them how to read. And it wasn't until I met Laurie that I actually found out that it was a thing, and that it actually has a name, which is?
It's hyperlexia.
Hyperlexia.
Matthew's awesome SK teacher this year. In SK, in the Catholic board, they start taking home little readers to read. I don't know when the public board starts.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah.
So she knew that he could read at such a high level that she brought in someone from the school board. So it wasn't real, I don't know if it's a real diagnosis yet. That, to help her come up with something for Matthew.
Right. Because
she
his reading level is so much higher than everybody.
And she doesn't want him to fall down or regress or anything. So she brought in, I don't know who it was, I didn't meet them. I just got the paper after, and it said that it had mentioned hyperlexia, and I'm looking at this, I'm like, what's that?
What does that mean? Dr. Google.
So Google, I Googled it, and I copy and pasted it in my binder so that I know, I can always tell people. But it's the ability to look at the word and just know how it sounds. So Matthew has never, and when he started talking, he was saying these gigantic dinosaur words.
Yeah.
And he's telling me, and I'm like, I'm sorry, baby, I don't know. You know what I mean? So he's going on and on and on and trying, and that was part of his frustration, but because he knew what it said, but forming the sound or whatnot. But he can look at it, I think it's like 85 to 90%.
Wow.
He can do, and he doesn't have to go, but all.
Yeah.
He just goes, ball. But he's saying gigantic words. He's not even saying ball or spot or run. And about 90% of the time, he's bang on with his pronunciation.
Wow.
A couple times I'm like, what are you trying to say? Show me the word, and I'll repeat it the proper way for him, but not very often.
Yeah.
So, yeah, hyperlexia. It sounds bad.
It does, because hyper's in there,
yes.
right? So.
But when I read what it meant, I'm like, oh, that's a good thing.
That makes sense.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my son, similarly, I've never had to teach him how to read, and early on, all the therapists and the specialists would be like, well, does he know how to read? Does he know how to write? And I'm like, I know in my heart that he knows how to read, but I can't prove it. And then one day he just picked up a whiteboard and started writing. And I'm like, see, I knew that he knew how to do it. And he was like 3 maybe at that time. And it was amazing to me. And this year he's actually been assessed for his reading competency. And it was down at like only first month of kindergarten. And that's the discrepancy between his ability to read, because I have to actually like close my computer when I'm typing out emails, because I know that he is reading every single word. So I have to be careful now to make sure I'm, using appropriate language and stuff. But the assessment itself, to be able to actually get the results out of what of his actual ability, is a big discrepancy, because even his teacher was like, I know he knows how to read at a higher level than this, but we can't pull that out of him.
I would say with Matthew, because he wasn't talking, I didn't even know if he knew his alphabet.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but one day, Word World, he loves TVO, which is great because it's all the learning. So they can watch TVO all day long.
Yeah.
I was watching his eyes moving from the letters, because they're like, find this letter, and his eyes would go. I'm like, okay, he knows his letters.
He knows how to do it.
Before they were saying, you know what I mean, or highlighting it. So I'm like, okay, he knows his letters, but he can tell me. So that's that was a struggle back then.
Yeah. Think of, and this is what I describe to people, is think of how frustrated you get when you're sick and you lose your voice and you're trying to say something to your child that's over in the next room. That's the frustration that our kids that are nonverbal feel all the time. So it forces us as their parents to really slow down and try to have even more patience than we think we have.
I thought I was a pretty patient person.
Yeah.
But, some things are coming and it's like, oh, it's not, but I have to be, because you hear the same thing 40, 50 million times, or the same, has to go in the same order or whatever. You can't just skip something. Okay, we're late, well, no, I have, because he's not leaving the door, or they're not leaving the door, or it's just, And, so, Lily, being 7 or whatnot, she doesn't have her patience like that yet. So for him to keep saying stuff on and on and on, she's like, she does yell. She's like, stop it. I'm like, Lily, you can't yell at him. You just, he just says it so many times. She's like, yeah, I know, but I'm like, I know, baby, but. Yeah. So it's teaching her patience at an early age.
Yeah.
So, and my husband, who, a male, they don't have very many patience.
Yeah. So
he gets frustrated a bit, but what can you do?
Yeah.
He's our son.
Exactly.
So,
well, thank you very much for sharing your story. I really, really appreciate it. So we'd love to get feedback from just this series, and I'll also link below the playlist from when we were doing it last year through Zintar Sears' website, but he's off ill now, actually. But I wanted to get these stories out, so I've started back up again. So I'll put a whole bunch of links below to other Many Faces of Autism videos that I've done as well, and share them around, because we want these stories out, and they're the real stories. They're the ones of how much we absolutely adore, get frustrated by, are completely, humbled by our kids on the autism spectrum. So thanks for watching, everyone. See you later.
Bye.